Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Words on Whiskey, episode 60. And you're very welcome. We've got a very different show this evening. We're taking it one stage further, if you like, than what we did last week, where we had Ardara Distillery, where they were in the process of setting up their distillery and hadn't got to the point of commencing the build yet. But what we have here is James Doherty from Sliabh Liag, who is based in Donegal, in beautiful lands of Sliabh Liag, and they have managed to make their dream come true and produce and create a fantastic distillery there. So James will take us through that process and share with us his experience of how he got to where he is and where they're going. So let's just bring in James. So if you have any questions, please do post them in the chat and I'm delighted to answer them. So let's bring in James. James, good evening.
Hey, Sergio, how are you keeping?
Excellent, excellent. Well, I can hear you loud and clear there perfectly. So I hope you can hear me okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Crystal clear.
Very good. Well, it's been quite a week for you.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming, and there's a kind of strange mix of relief and excitement, and there wasn't any tears, but there was certainly a bit of dust in the eye.
Yeah, I can imagine. I know it's been a long road to get to where you have, but you seem to be making great strides in terms of the brand as well as the distillery. But let's go back, if you like, and tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up leaving the corporate world, if you like, a very successful corporate positions in big brands in the drinks industry. So maybe a little bit about your Irish roots and your heritage and how you decided to come back to Ireland.
Surely. Well, so I suppose my parents, my mum's from Kilcar, which is here in Donegal, just down the road from where we are now. And my dad, although he was born in England, was also his parents were from the same area, so from Carrick. In fact, the house I live in, we bought off the internet, and it turned out it was my great grandmother's homestead. So, you know, there's a bit of serendipity in there. But I suppose I had a very kind of typical first generation sort of English Irish kid living, you know, in the UK, going through a product of an English schooling system, mad keen on rugby and cricket, which is probably not particularly popular up here, but spending all of our summers kind of feral on the farm and you know, fishing and enjoying the whole time. And I studied agriculture. I went off to Africa for a year. Met Moira, actually, my wife, and she's from Zimbabwe. We came back. I finished my degree, did a master's in water engineering, which has actually come in handy now. And then went back out to Africa for 6 years, growing tea and coffee and peppercorns, a few things like that. But we came back at the end of the 90s, and bizarrely, I was just targeting food and drink companies, and a guy at William Grant's called Vincent Heavey was recruiting for someone for Eastern Europe sales role, and he wanted someone with sales experience, some European languages, and I didn't have either of those. But he took a punt on me, and really I was very fortunate to walk into Grant's at a time, and it's still a hugely entrepreneurial business, but at that time it was, you know, there was a masses of innovation going on. There was kind of moving from a Scotch whiskey business to an international branded business, and I suppose my kind of engineering problem solving mindset got to work in marketing rather than in solving engineering problems. So I worked my way through the business, did some time in duty free just after that collapsed, which was a kind of fascinating time trying to solve what the travel retail business would look like, working for a guy called Bob Downing, and ended up on the board. Did 4 years on the board looking after the international sales piece of the world that nobody else wanted. So I had Europe, Eastern Europe, Middle East, Africa, bits of Asia, and Latin America, and they all had kind of interesting challenges to solve. So Paul Rochford, my FD, and myself kind of traveled the world, problem solving, troubleshooting, and growing brands in kind of emerging markets. So great times. Left Grant's, and just after we bought Tullamore Dew, or after Grant's bought Tullamore Dew, and went to work for Foster's initially, but Foster's then got taken over by Sab Miller. Sab Miller didn't want me to move to Melbourne, said could I go to Hong Kong for them and open up Peroni in Asia, which probably not the toughest gig in the world, to be fair. But went out, did a couple of years at it, but very shortly after kind of getting there, Moira and I were both of a mind that the corporate route kind of world wasn't really where we wanted to be. And there'd been these ideas that we've been building over time within Grants when I was working there, kind of thinking about things. And I said to Mo, you know, that idea you had for a seaweed in alcohol, I think it's gin, and I think we can do it like, you know, this, and that's what Andulaman is. And I said, and do you know what? There's a style of Irish whiskey that's been lost, and it's this dry, smoky style that's pre-prohibition. And I said, I think there's a really distinctive positioning in there, and I think we could do it. And yeah, so that's nearly 6 years ago now when we came back.
2014,
with the kind of dream of, you know, we talk about reclaiming the distilling heritage of Donegal and doing that through savoury maritime gin and smoky Irish whiskies.
Yeah, I mean, did you choose this as a lifestyle choice, a lifestyle business, as opposed to an entrepreneurial one, or a bit of both?
A bit of both, I think. Actually, I do think I'm guilty of probably selling Moira a lifestyle choice, a bit more than the reality. I think is that I'm a commercial beast, and I kind of know, you know, I'm kind of ambitious, not just for ourselves but for the whole area. And to do that, I think you need to produce a scalable business, and so, you know, distinctive international spirits business based in Donegal. I think for good on you, Liam. I think for Moira, I think she thought it would be a much smaller business for a bit longer. But, you know, as you commented on earlier, the last 3 years, the business has really, you know, we've overcome the hurdles we had at the beginning, and the business is kind of growing, you know, rapidly and well. And you know, we're in a good place despite COVID. So, you know, we're very, very grateful for that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously working for these big brands like you mentioned, Peroni, Foster's. What do you take from working in corporations, if you like, of that size? And how do you apply those to, you know, a medium to small size business?
I think there's some of the lessons that are actually very, very applicable. So I think, you know, kind of focusing on doing a few things well. You know, it's very easy to get distracted by doing lots and lots of things. So we try to focus on doing, you know, a few brands and do them as well as we possibly can. Very quickly after we arrived, we realized that there's a rhythm to your life in a corporate world that's driven by reports and things, and we kind of put that on ourselves to give ourselves structure. So, you know, we kind of forced ourselves to sort of report, you know, not quite monthly, but certainly quarterly, check in, how are we doing, you know, are we doing the things we said we would do? So I think that stuff is very applicable. And then from a why do you exist kind of perspective, you know, the idea of reclaiming the distilling heritage Donegal for us is a big idea, but it's also an extremely sensible idea from a commercial perspective, because it's a very distinctive position. It doesn't directly compete with kind of any of the bigger kind of brands that are out there, and it allows us to kind of target profitable niches in the business rather than looking at areas where maybe the bigger guys are not looking, or maybe that the opportunities that they would have looked at and just decided they're too small or they're too complicated to access or whatever. So that portfolio we've built is kind of targeting kind of specific niches that we see, and actually they're also things that we're passionate about doing. So we make drinks that we like more than anything else.
Yeah. So I mean, you've taken yourself and the family, I guess, from Hong Kong, from Malawi, from Eastern Europe, from the UK, and you've settled home in a very, very rural but stunning part of the world. And really, if people aren't familiar with it, I'd just like to share maybe, let me see if I can do that actually.
That's an inspiring place that we live. So
Yeah, it certainly is, and I think it's important that we kind of get a chance to share that. So let's see if I can do that. Look, you carry on and tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about where you are then now, and I'll get that up and running.
Yeah, well, we live in southwest Donegal. We live on the Sliabh Liag Peninsula, and we live between the village of Carrick and Ardara. So our gin distillery is in Carrick at the moment, and the whiskey distillery is in Ardara. We live right in the shadow of Sliabh Liag, the mountain of flagstones. It's a beautiful, raw and inspiring place. It's out, it's on the edge of Ireland, it's on the edge of Europe, but it's a home to a kind of resilient people that have a sort of sense of melancholy and mischief. I describe it as that calls to you, and it called to me, even though I was born in England and brought up there. It called me to come back and do what we do. But whether it's Sliabh Liag itself, the Silver Strand, the beaches around here, you can't be anything but inspired by the beauty that surrounds us here. It's not Chocolate Box Island. It's not pretty in the way that the sort of Wicklow Mountains are pretty. It's beautiful in a kind of raw and challenging way, and that kind of brings a lovely angle to what we try to bring to the world in spirits, I think.
Yeah. Is this something that you kind of had a longing to come home, if you like? Is that how you see it? And then obviously the business fits in so nicely with it. Or
Yeah,
was that all linked together?
I think actually, one of the things that both Maura and I would say would be, we've been slightly gypsy-like in terms of we've moved around the world and explored places and learned new things, and but I also think that there's something about being slightly on the outside, and we wanted to come somewhere. We wanted to put our roots down and do something that had kind of I suppose I wanted to do something that really could change the way people thought about the Gaeltacht. So instead of try and champion the Irish language, try and bring a different take on the Donegal Gaeltacht and what it could bring to Irish spirits. And I thought that was an interesting, differentiated, and kind of reasonably ownable territory that we could bring to the world, and do it in a way that created employment for a lot of people, might spark more distilleries. Ultimately, I think Donegal should have, could have as many as 5 distilleries, maybe 6 would be a good number, especially if you had one up in Derry. Sorry, excuse me. So you could kind of make it a place of pilgrimage, and the style of whiskey that would have been here, and the styles of poaching that would have been here, all of those would have been smoky originally. And so that, for me, is that kind of calling that brought us back, made it worth coming here, and could ultimately create opportunity. As you know yourself, Sergius, a job in a distillery probably provides another sort of 5 to 10 jobs around it in terms of support industries and what I have. So they're great businesses because they're not here for tax breaks. They take sense of place and make it really, really central to what you do. And I think, with us, we try and do things that celebrate Donegal, that are soft drinking hard spirits, and that are beautiful, not necessarily pretty, but ultimately challenge the way people see a category as it is at the moment. And so that's one of the things that we're probably, with savoury Irish Maritime Gin instead of the sweet gins that are out there, and bringing this sort of smoky whiskey back, but bringing it in with dark silky, silky. I think silky itself has this hint of smoke, but dark silky brings it up a level and starts to tell you a different story about where things can go.
Yeah. I mean, we see a comment there from Kevin Cunningham. I believe he's local, is he?
Yeah, it's a good local name. So yeah, for sure.
Excellent. And then some people in from Argentina. There's Jonathan. So we've had people from all over the world coming in to have a look. But as I said, I did want to share, give a sense of place, if you like, to your setup. So let's just show how magnificent the area is. So that's obviously Sliabh Liag, and the highest cliffs in Europe, I believe.
Well, yeah. So among the highest cliffs in Europe, I think
Amongst the
there's,
high.
yeah, I think everybody argues about this, but that's the back of the mountain. So Sliabh Liag is the mountain of flagstones. On the back of it, that's
Yeah.
actually the viewpoint of Bunglass, and you can see the Giant's Table and chairs there. So it's about 600 meters to the top, and a fearsome, one man's pass that actually takes you to the peak, which is I think it's 45 centimeters wide, and you have a 600-meter drop down one side and probably a 300-meter drop on the other side. So not for the faint-hearted, although I do know that one of the distillers from Tullamore actually base jumped off it.
No way. Wow.
Yeah, and that's on YouTube, so you can look up Greg McEntee on there and see.
I've stood up there all right, and I can promise you the weather was not like it looks in this photograph, but there you go.
But you can see the northern lights from up there as well. So on a good day when there's not too much cloud,
Yeah.
and that's the sail, the rock that you can see there that sort of swoops around to the right.
Yeah.
That's people abseil and climb that, and at the top you've got the Martello Towers that were there.
That's a watchtower, is it?
Yeah, they were there to warn of the Napoleonic Wars. So in the Napoleonic era, that if the French landed somewhere, that they would light a fire on the top of each one of those. That would send a signal around the coast to get a message to Dublin. So
Right.
I guess the days before mobile phones. So,
There's on a day perhaps a bit more realistic, the weather there, but I mean, it is magnificent.
it is, and if you're up here, you would say if you don't like the weather, wait 10 minutes because it'll probably change.
Yeah, I'm sure it changes a lot, but
Yeah.
no, lovely. And of course, the Northwest is synonymous with, I suppose, primarily poaching more than anything, illicit distilling and distilling. Of course, you did have whiskey produced there as well, particularly in Derry. But Donegal, if you like, had the reputation of producing the finest poaching in the world. How aware were you of that before you started all this journey?
Well, I mean, so I actually had hitchhiked over here when I was a student, and shortly before my gran died, she gave me my grandfather's recipe, and to my knowledge, and I've got 70 odd cousins, she never gave it to any of the others. And at the time I was farming, so she had no reason to give it to me really. But I was always taken by, my granddad had a mischievous glint in his eye. He was a wonderful, gentle, big man. I mean, he was 6'3", and and he was a big man. But he was a poaching maker of some renown. And my dad tells me tales of his dad and his and his grandfather being poaching makers. So they're up in the hills. And if you look at Coffee and him writing about his time as a tax inspector,
Yes.
he refers to most farmers in Donegal being full-time distillers and part-time farmers, and not the other way around, which was what they all claimed. So and there's some stats I think you had in the Irish Whiskey magazine some years ago which showed that there were more still seizures in Donegal than
anywhere else.
Yeah, it was
amazing.
Crazy. And to me, then the idea that you don't have a legitimate distilling presence here is kind of really, really odd. And the last distillery here was Burt, which is on the road between Letterkenny and Derry, and the chimney and the original still house is still standing.
Well, that was a big distillery. I saw the capacity there was 200,000 gallons.
It was a big distillery, but it made I think it made light style whiskies and probably was certainly not going to sell anything into its home market when most of the illicit poachings would have been peated. The idea that they wouldn't have been is crazy.
Yeah. So, I mean, the style of whiskey that you're looking to produce, obviously now you have the capability to do pretty much what you want, but you very much nailed it across to peated whiskey. And I think the only one that is, from day one said that's what you want to do is peated whiskey when you get distilling. What was is that a hark to the tradition of the local area?
Yeah, I think it's more about sort of capturing that what would have been typical here. I think there was an Ulster style. There are people who would know the history better than me, but the Ulster style of single malt would have all have been peated originally, and it's almost a bit like the kind of pot still debate. There's historical tradition and there's kind of modern tradition, and the historical tradition of Ulster for me is peated single malts. Now I'm going to do peated pot stills because that's what I want to do as well. And if you want to do if you're going to do something, for me, the kind of, you have to make choices in your business. You have to make choice about how you're going to fund the business, how you're going to go to market. And one of the disciplines I learned at Sliabh Miller, and actually two of our biggest investors, or three of our biggest investors, were main board directors at Sliabh Miller, was the idea of where to play and how to win. So if you're going to play in international spirits, and then particularly Irish whiskey, how do you win in there? Now, it doesn't mean I have to win the whole category, but how do I win my piece of it? And for me, that's about being distinctive, and doing a single thing as well as you possibly can. So for me, that's kind of the pursuit of smoky whiskeys through kind of peat, and not complicating our lives by trying to please a more mainstream kind of solution. And I know why we've had certain pushbacks in certain markets where people would say, well, we're leaving smoke and peat to the Scots, and it's like, okay, well, we'll see about that kind of thing. But so it's certainly brought a few headaches, but actually in the main, it's because of the way we've worked with Great Northern on the Silkies and brought those to life. I think we've brought those to life in a very approachable way. So they're certainly smoky. They're not peated in the way that you would find in an Islay. But if we could,
they're not iodine peaty, I think.
No, and I think triple distilling kind of lifts those kind of the flavors you lose in that third distillation. I think are those kind of medicinal TCP iodine notes, and so you get a kind of cleaner, drier, ashy smoke that comes through. So I think that is so approachable that it's nowhere near as challenging as people think. And I think what's really interesting is like being at Whiskey Live and seeing people's reactions when they kind of go, oh, I don't do peated whiskies. And it's like, well, why don't you just have a try? And they're, oh, okay, and that unexpected nature of it, I think is kind of it's a joyous thing, really. So so I think we've kind of taken. I think we see that how to win art question is by being distinctive, being very focused on that, and not trying to be more things than we really are.
Yeah. Well, can you tell us a little bit then about some of the brands that you started off with? Because one of the first brands that you produced, and I have it here, is, and my pronunciation is terrible, Doherty.
Doherty, that's right.
Which was a gin. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that and why you went down that route first.
Yeah, so I suppose we always wanted to create this idea of an international spirits business based in Donegal rather than a whiskey distillery just in Donegal. So that was always the idea, was trying to create a portfolio of brands. And so the naming of the brands is all different, as opposed to say Dingle, which is all of the brands are called Dingle. And that's I think it's an equally justifiable kind of route to success, but I think for us it was always about kind of creating individual brands, individual brand worlds, and underpinning them with kind of technical credentials, because we don't have 200 years of distilling experience in the way that say a middle, the guys down at IDL would have. So how do you demonstrate that you do things that are credible, authentic and credible? And so with Doherty, this is actually inspired by a conversation that Moira had with my auntie. So we were picking dulse seaweed out on the rocks and ready to dry it to have as a snack. And at the time I was working on in the new brand section of Grants, and Moira, we were doing Hendrix, you can imagine. So Moira said to me, has anyone ever done anything with this in alcohol? At the time no one had. And I kind of came back to her after a while and said, actually, I think it's gin. I think this is how we do it. And then Mo went off and kind of said, well, look, I think, I'm looking for names that are phonetically Irish, but phonetically quite straightforward to say, like Doherty is. I came up with this concept of an Irish maritime gin. So we felt like a seaweed gin is just a very narrow opportunity. And a gin of the sea is kind of a bit wider, but actually a maritime gin plays into a much bigger narrative, which we thought was important. It's super technical. So in fact, I was picking one of the seaweeds, which is very shy, called pepper dulse, or the truffle of the sea. I was picking that last week under with the full moon and the low tides. And if you look at the top of the bottle here, it'll actually tell you when we harvested those seaweeds. So if you go onto the website and put in your bottle number, batch number, and the moon phase, it will tell you who distilled it, when it was distilled, where all the botanicals are from, how much alcohol we put in, how much alcohol we got out, how long it spent in tank, how we bottled it, who bottled it, who the team that actually were bottling it. So you'll find out who actually wax sealed the bottles. And it was about creating this kind of savory gin that was kind of dense and complex from a taste perspective, that would kind of almost be a whiskey drinker's gin in terms of complexity, but that told a story that was really specific, hyper local to the Donegal coast. And hopefully it delivers that, because it delivers for us a sort of credentials, a distilling credentials, because distilling seaweed, as any of the guys who do it will tell you, it is far from straightforward, and we had plenty of mistakes and happy accidents as well on the way. So
and it's a beautiful bottle, and really distinctive. It was a Celtic bottle and Donegal bottle, and we don't see it in the photo, but I love the seal on the very top of it, which gives some.
Well, it was kind of the design of the calligraphy and the artwork was done by a local artist, Sean Fitzgerald, and we briefed him, and we were working with Mark Keating, who does a lot of the Porterhouse and Dingle stuff as well, and we wanted something that was really pared back. We thought a gin from Donegal would not have lots of Victorian pictures and stuff of leaves and plants and whatever. It would tell you its name. It would tell you what its category was, Irish Maritime. It would say I'm from Donegal, and the rest of it you can deal with. And then we wanted to make it fit. So the bottles that washed off the Spanish Armada that are wrecked on the coast here were either dumpy onion-shaped bottles, like an old-fashioned pirate bottle almost, or they were square, fat, dumpy ones like this. And this is actually an olive oil bottle that we've repurposed. So, but it tells a story of a sense of time, which is, when savory drinks were the only thing that was available. So it's
very distinctive. I mean, you have 6 different seaweeds in it?
Yes, well, 6 conventional botanicals and 5 seaweeds. So
5 seaweeds, okay.
Yeah, so you have sugar kelp, which I know a few other guys use. You have dulse, which has been used, I think, by one other person or 2 other companies. But we use carrageen moss, which we vapor infuse, because we tried to macerate it in a still, and we won't be doing that again. So we vapor infuse that. It has doulamon itself, which is a seaweed that's believed to be blessed by God, because it grew so fast during the famine era. You could harvest it and then eat it, and then come back a week later, it would be there again. And then pepper dulse, which is known as the truffle of the sea. And literally, I cut it. It grows like this high. It's absolutely tiny. So you're on your hands and knees on the rocks as the tide goes out, and then you get chased back in again. So
well, dare I say, you went in at the deep end, and you got very technical on it as well. I mean, and surely that can just take you further when you're going to your whiskey production. So, but you went a stage further with this one, and you went and did one at was it 57% ABV?
Yeah. So So I suppose you take the Armada story on another level. So there's a cross in the middle of that label that says Santa Ana, and that was where the Duquesa Santa Ana sank. So that was an Andalusian hulk that was part of the Armada. It sank there. The commander, a guy called Don Alonso de Leva, was from Rioja. So we brought Rioja barrels over and aged the gin. Sorry, excuse me. We bottled it at 57% Navy strength. But if it's an Armada one, surely it's got to be Armada strength. And we leave it in barrel for about 12 weeks. So just long enough to pick up the wine notes, but not long enough for the juniper and the oak to fight.
Does it pick up the color?
It picks up a hint of color. You get a sort of slight pinkness to it. So it's I hesitate to call it a pink gin, but it has a gentle pink hue to it, rose gold kind of hue. And because Moira's from Zimbabwe, the kind of little hint of Africa in there is, if you look at the label in a mirror, it's actually a map of Zimbabwe. So
So a lot of thought gone into the branding and the labeling and the history and the linking all those elements together. How important are they?
They're absolutely crucial to us because, well, I suppose first of all we're nerds, and so we kind of enjoy that. But I think also if you think about all of us distilleries, distillers, distilleries, we all have a sense of place. And that's absolutely clear, and whether it's Mickle and down in Connemara, or whether it's Loch Ree or Blackwater or Dingle, we all have a sense of place. And ours is, the southwest Donegal Peninsula. So that's absolutely key. But the thing that I suppose that I like to think about in a brand context is if you can link it to a sense of time, it kind of helps you tell the story. It helps you focus on how the whiskies or the gin should taste. And so, Doulaman is a gin that's kind of set in that Armada era. So a lot of the sort of, bottles would have been wax sealed. The top is stamped with the fingerprint of the mountain, the contours of the mountain as a fingerprint. All of these things kind of put you in a sense of time, which then we hope we can kind of execute against. And with whiskies, with the Silky, it's kind of pre-prohibition, the style that was there before Irish whiskey kind of lost its dominant position.
You see, I mean, here is the Silky, obviously your first whiskey and one you must be really proud of. But I mean, what I love is the link and the research, and even the name Silky, the labeling, the iconic mermaid there, they all tie in very, very nicely together. But I think this came out. When did this come out? 2016 or 2015?
Yeah, 2016 originally. January 16, we had a launch here in Carrick, and
I remember
you were up and in Evelyn's what was then John the Miner's bar, but and the liquid has evolved significantly since then. So we always kind of wanted to do something challenging from a kind of design perspective, and probably wanted to challenge much more on the liquid side than we were ever able to do, and didn't have access to the whiskies we do now. So, one of the things that worked very well was the design style, kind of the kind of very pared back labeling and all the rest of it kind of stood out on shelf. And I think that went very well. The fact, I think, that we were telling this very singular smoky story and then not delivering on it in the whiskey, I think, was an issue. And that feedback, we, much as I didn't like hearing it, it's kind of, you've got to take it on board. And we, so 2019, we got into a position with Great Northern where we were able to get hold of, genuinely peated Irish whiskey, so smoky Irish whiskies, and we could then start to tell a tale. And so the brand you have there is the legendary Silky. So that has 4% of the blend is peated. It's just a little bit of seasoning, almost nothing on the nose. It's just when you drink it, it gets the mid part of your tongue and it starts to warm up. You then get this hint of smoke to it. It's sort of at a dry, ashy kind of smoke, which is absolutely kind of where we wanted to be. And it's close to the center of Irish whiskey today, I guess.
Yeah, I have to say, of all the whiskies that I have had for cocktails, I think this one, for some reason, lends itself particularly well to whiskey sours.
Okay.
I really, and I remember on that night, I mean, I had more than one. Maybe that's why they were getting better. But certainly the best whiskey sours I've ever tried. So,
well,
of course, that brings me down to the point that you have Deirdre there with you as well. And,
that's right. So we're very lucky because the team are ostensibly all local characters, except some of the newer guys coming in where you are not. But Dee was working for Richmond Brands down in Dublin, and as you know, she was, I think, the world champion Bacardi cocktail champion in 2014. And we had a conversation with Dee and sort of, asked if she would come back and help with our marketing and help bring the brands to life particularly in that on-trade context. And thankfully she did, and she's been with us ever since. And, we're now in more than 30 countries and, rolling out, all of the states of America. And we've got kind of drinks that are versatile and work in an on-trade environment and can cocktail well and can do those kind of things, and Dee can help us showcase those. And then we have and we're kind of trying to build now the sort of toolkits for how we how we take these drinks even further to make them even, build the stories out even more. And we know as well that at the end of the day, I don't have a Donegal accent, neither does Moira, and it's fantastic that we were able to give jobs to people in the area, but also people like Dee who wanted to come home are able to come home and work in the industry they love, and that's a fantastic thing.
Yeah, I suppose that brings me one point closer to the one I wanted to address was COVID situation in terms of what it's done and how it's affected your business and how you've reacted to it. Just before that, I see Dennis is asking a question. Will you see Irish more as a smoky whiskey than a peaty one?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I suppose we focus I suppose the language around peat for me is owned by Scotch. If you talk about peat, it's just everyone immediately goes to Islay. They immediately go to TCP, iodine, big challenge, big robust whiskies. And for me, we can tell a smoky story and use smoke as a flavor and talk about what it actually delivers to the consumer, to the drinker, rather than peat, which is an input to the production process, if you like. So I just find the whole peat head thing really challenging, and so I don't want to fight with or I don't want to be in a sort of head-on locking horns with these guys. I want to come at it from a different angle, because I think that gives us more leverage and more opportunity for telling our story in a kind of better and more engaging way. So, but it's something I recognize we end up having to discuss because the peat heads want to discuss it.
Yeah.
But it is, for me, a conversation about smoke and bringing a journey through smoky Irish whiskey and the flavour as a more interesting place for us to play.
If I'm not mistaken, James, am I starting to see a trend of Scotch becoming more smoky or offering more smoky offerings than they used to?
Absolutely. And actually Johnny Walker started that. So if you look at the Diageo and you go back sort of 15 years, I would argue that, and I've done some research, but I wouldn't say I've done a heard of it. But if you look at the way Johnny Walker has told a story for, the aspirational drink is actually a Johnny Walker Black, which is a smoky or peated Scotch whiskey. They've made Johnny Walker Red peatier. They've made Black and White. And all of the kind of feeder-in brands, the value brands that exist in emerging markets, they are all now peated in a way they never were before. And that, I think, is Diageo very deliberately laddering up people into kind of Johnny Walker Black and taking it on there from there. So I think that's a very specific kind of thing that Johnny Walker has done. And then outside of that, I think that people like to flirt with peated, and so what you've got is that Islay is Isla's probably 15%, is it, of the total single malt category? So it's not the biggest bit, but it's the most talked about bit, and everyone kind of wants to sort of dip into that and see if they can leverage it to become the less challenging one, the easier one. I think it's
you've got three. You've got, I think, three of the distilleries, if not more, are producing non-peated whiskey there as well.
Yeah, and that's probably more interesting as a development to going forward. Do you think
there's another question in from somebody I don't recognize at all?
No.
Yeah. Do you think peated pot still will give you that leverage?
Absolutely. And so we were actually we cooked our peated pot still today. So using peated malt and green barley, and so today was just a test run to see that the heat exchangers worked. But I have peated malt, green barley that's obviously unpeated, and then I've got peated oats coming on Friday. So I think peated pot still, for me, is definitely a really interesting place to play.
Yeah.
And within our cask scheme, I've already got my own cask ready to be laid down, and it will be a peated pot still for sure.
Double or triple distilled, because you do have that functionality.
So we have the functionality within the distillery, but they'll all be initially triple distilled.
Yeah. Okay. And then we'll take this a little bit further, and you went and did. I think I'm missing one of the silkies you did, but I'll come back to it. So this is the dark silky, and I love the branding on this. I don't know why. Maybe it's just the color, but Certainly in terms of branding and imagery, I love it. And this is a
Thank
bit
you.
more peated.
It is. So the blend is 4% of the legendary Silky is peated, and dark Silky 15% of it is peated. And I think one of the things that Silky's kind of doing quite well is that it's sort of bridging between styles. So there's a heavy component of virgin grain whiskey and virgin casks in Silky. So in regular Silky or legendary Silky, it's 15% of the blend is in virgin oak cask, which gives it its color and some of the oiliness. And then in the dark Silky, 15% of it is a triple distilled peated Irish whiskey, a single malt but matured in sherry casks. 15% is double distilled in bourbon casks, and then the balance, the 70%, is grain whiskey, maize based, because it's Great Northern, which has got that kind of popcorn buttery sweetness, and then you've got a virgin oak cask, which makes it almost salted caramel like. So the thing for me is that, especially using younger whiskies, which we are, then you need to be able to hang that smoky flavor on really good things, and a virgin grain in Silky is a absolute star. And we were very lucky. We had it bottled ready for Paddy's Day 18 months ago, and of course that was when lockdown hit, so we never launched. We had the board all got together. We kind of quickly said, right, what are we going to do? And you kind of have that ugly moment where you start thinking about, well, if I'm going to cut, what are we going to cut? And you think about people and the order that people are going to have to go, and you have some pretty ugly conversations. But we then actually said, well, you know what, we're going to cut all of the costs we can to the bone, but we're going to go hard selling. And we went online with Dark Silky, and it got picked up on Twitter. And I think the kind of Friday night dram, Saturday night sip, the Sunday night sup guys just got behind it. And at the time, no one else really launched anything for a good 2 months.
It was quiet for quite a while, yeah. You were there from the beginning of lockdown, for sure.
And I think we got a bit of a free run with it, and it was distinctive and different. And I think all of that played pretty well. And then kind of from there, the sort of international pieces where Dave Wood has been driving the US, and Bart de Smaelen has been driving the other half of the world. Those guys have been, working their shoe leather really hard. And
I saw you're only missing a few states now in the US. You're missing Dakota and Hawaii.
Yeah, North and South Dakota and Hawaii are the only ones that we don't have a formal agreement in place, which is quite something.
Yeah, if anybody wants Hawaii, come here. Yeah, no. But the other thing is, you brought out some cask strength variations of these, and they just disappear. I mean, they're gone within a few days, if not faster.
Yeah, it's a very strange thing. I probably, if I'm honest, I wasn't convinced by the cask strength idea at all. And particularly, I know Silky. I mean, you can see I've got ice in mine here. I kind of felt like 64% alcohol was just really, would people buy that? I was just couldn't get my head around it. And David Mara tortured me and told me I was wrong. And then I said, well, let's do a small release and we'll see what happens. And we bottled it, and I think we did 210 bottles or something, and it sold out in 24 hours. And I was sitting there going, my goodness, maybe there is something in this. And so we don't do it all the time. I suppose they're still kind of, for us, I think they're set sort of €80, so they're not hopefully breaking the bank here. And if you look at the secondary market, they're certainly performing well. They're performing well on the auction sites, and we've you have that internal conversation that says, should you sell it for more? And I think we're very clear that we know the whiskies that are in here. We think they're good value at the €80, and frankly, I'd rather people drank them and came back and bought more. That's what we want, rather than sort of kind of driving either the collectible market or kind of driving a poor value play. I don't think that's the right thing for us to do. And I'd probably
What was
get beaten out of town in Donegal if I start trying to tell people to pay €100 for a bottle of whiskey.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's a dilemma. Well, I mean, it's a dilemma that not everybody has. So, I mean, it's a good dilemma to have, if you like. But
Yeah,
I'm missing one here. There was a red
you
silky
missed
as
the
well.
red silky. Yeah, actually, I was going to have a bottle here, but it's in my cupboard. But at the moment, I've got one bottle with that much left in it of my own.
Yeah.
So the red silky was done for sort of two reasons. One, we wanted something specific for the crowdfunding. So we did a Rioja only finish for the crowdfunding, and I was also convinced that the Rioja finishes on whiskey that I've seen are very, very sweet. I mean, strawberries and cream kind of sweet, and I wanted to bring in a drier element to it. So we went and got some Ribera del Duero casks as well, and then finished the two, and then put them together, and actually the combination was so much better than the individuals. So and red silky was probably five days on the online shop. It was all sold out. I think in 2 days we had all of our distributors, and then most of them, without tasting it, kind of just went, "Yep, I'll take that." And
I'm trying to remember, were there two, one at cask strength and one at normal?
Yes, there was.
Yeah. I think I got the normal one. I'm trying to remember now. Yeah,
there was 46, and I think it was 63.5. I think the
when you say 46 is not shabby.
No, well, we can't afford a chill filtration unit, so
all right, okay, needs must.
Yes, so
there's food pairings as a point from Dennis.
Is Dark Sea more a conversation drop, or would it be a great food pairing? No, I think it does bring different flavors. It's got an earthy peatiness to it, which I think works really well. I think if you put ice in it, it changes the nature of it, and because I always drink with ice for pleasure, then we deliberately blend with Brian down at Great Northern to make sure that they work well with a drop of water, but also with ice. So it's, for me, the Dark Silky has this dry smokiness inspired by the taste of Grandad's pipe. You know, when you snuck down as a kid in the morning, there was a cold ashy pipe there, and you sucked on it and you felt really big. But you had that sweet tobacco ashy thing. I wanted that in a drink, and I think we've got that. And then when you put ice in it, it kind of transforms into something a bit more earthy and kind of, and just different. And I think that allows you to kind of do different things. I love Dark Silky with Korean spices on my prawns before I put them on a barbecue, which is probably horrific for most people, but that's how I marinate our prawns, and then throw them on the brine.
Yes, that has been done in our house as well, with some rather good whiskey, I'm afraid to say. But sure, what can you do? It wasn't under my control. But look, I mean, you have this. You've taken this peaty route, and obviously you haven't gone down the pot still route yet with them.
Yeah.
But that is where you want to go, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But I suppose how we're going to get there is, if you like, with this. So this is a mock-up of your Ardara Distillery.
So no, that's the old one, Sir Jos.
That's the old. I see there's a later one with double-sided angles, so there's no rounded roof on the other one.
Yeah, so this was the site we had in Carrick, in the parish of Glenconnell.
Right. Okay.
That ultimately got someone squatted on the land and then dragged us through the courts, and we ultimately won the court case, but it was too late to save that distillery because we'd already moved on to another site and got another planning permission, which is Ardara. So terrible shame.
But let's show them the one that you have now. So obviously this is the spirit safe.
Safe, yes.
Yeah, and it's Foresight. I think Foresight did a turnkey solution for you, and we had Richard on the show earlier, and he was talking about the ability to create, bespoke turnkey solutions. What was your logic with going for Foresight? So not the cheapest, and I suppose at the time they weren't the easiest to get a hold of.
No, I suppose I've known Richard Senior and Richard Junior for a number of years, and the beauty, I think, of Forsyths for us in terms of, we were still raising money when we elected to go with Forsyths, and you ultimately underpin the business by going with a Forsyth's. There are other great distillery manufacturers, but with Forsyth's on your ticket, it says that you're serious, that you're building a kind of really substantial piece of kit, and you're underpinning a brand that people want to believe in. So the other thing with Forsyth's was that they were willing to kind of engage with me on the concept that if my grandfather as an illicit distiller had turned up today, and would he recognize the process we had in place? So I wanted to be specifically all grains in, and we are so we don't have a mash tun. We go straight into a 2-ton cooker, and we use the cooker for malt, and we use it for the pot still today. From the cookers, it goes through a number of heat exchangers, so we've got a massive amount of heat recovery stuff going on. But it goes into stainless steel fermenters, and then there's the fermenters in the background, and then into 3 copper pots, a 10,000 litre wash still with an offset neck, and then the intermediate still is 5,000, and the spirit still is 3,600 litres. So on a double shift,
big enough for that's big enough.
Yeah, I'm concerned it's not big enough, but that's probably my level of ambition. But it's ultimately, I guess, it'll produce sort of 500,000 LPA, sort of 3,000 odd barrels a year, like on the configuration you see in front of you. But there is space on you can see the window on the right hand of the side. There's space there for a further 3 fermenters, so we could go to a 24/7 and take it up to 650,000 LPA and really run it hard. The stills are in the window, kind of overlooking the village of Ardara. So the village of Ardara is literally 150 meters from that gable. So we're in a very fortunate place, because it's a town. It's a festival town. It's got a real kind of tourist vibe about it. It's the local community have got right behind us and been so supportive, and all of the contractors. So Doherty is a local contractor who's built the frame and the all of the kind of ancillary services. Hugh Gavigan is a local contractor who did all of the groundworks and the flood mitigation stuff, plus the new barrel store. Electrician Shane Mulroney, local man as well. So we've gone local wherever we possibly can. And Forsyth's have come inside and built this sort of turnkey, as you can see, with inside it, and it gives peace of mind, because there's decisions. I'm an engineer, but not, I'm not a practicing engineer. So there's a lot of stuff that I've kind of made decisions that are conceptual rather than practical, and Forsyth's have made them practical for us.
Yeah. But what's the time from construction starting to get to this point here? What is it, just over a year?
Just under a year, actually. So it's 51 weeks we had from the first pile going in until the first run of the wash still, and it's 52 weeks exactly to the first spirit coming off.
Yeah, what I loved what you had was the live webcam. I think the webcam is still live, actually, isn't it?
It is, yeah, it is. After the crowdfunding, we had lots of requests from the guys that supported us with the crowd in the Crowdcube exercise, wanting lots of photos all the time of what was going on, and we thought that actually the live streaming the webcam was the way of giving them a kind of constant feed of what was going on. Unfortunately, we didn't have power on the site until quite recently, so we weren't able to move the cameras inside. But now that we've got broadband, electricity, and all the rest of it on site, we can now look at streaming that instead, so you can actually see the distilling going on.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite an achievement, and it's great that you used local workers there as well. Just in terms of the fermenters here,
yes.
What's your typical fermentation time? Or is
it still early? It's still early, really, and the thing is, with us being grains in, there's a risk that it could be a bit citrusy, and that we could get some oily character out of the husks. So at the moment, we want to target sort of 72 hours. With you should have most of your kind of fermentation really undone within sort of 44 hours, and then it's kind of what happens afterwards. So we'll now make those decisions over the next few months to sort of really try and get to the liquid we want. I mean, the spirit that came off the stills today was just soft and sweet and smoky. It was just gorgeous, and the whole place smells like a distillery now. So it's
yeah. Well, there's greetings from David and Carolyn in Tasmania. I don't know what time it is. It's either very early or very...
Yeah,
I think it's
thank
very
you, guys.
early.
Yeah.
Yes, they're very keen on the Irish whiskey. Let's see what other photos. That's it in terms of photos, which is probably enough for our readers. But look, there were a lot of decisions, I suppose, that had to be made along the way, and you put in a very strong management team, if you like, or investment team. So you've got the two investors from Sliabh Miller, if you like, and James Keith, who has experience in fundraising and so forth.
Yeah.
What was your decision based on to decide to go crowdsourced?
So I'm just sending you one of the photos as well, Sergio. So you'll get one in a second. But we elected very early on to try and make this a completely retail type, fundraising, and that meant that effectively we would first go to friends, then to family, then to the fans, and we kind of fished the friends and family really hard, and we've got a really fantastic group of backers that have kind of come in for us, and within that we have kind of guys who are drinks industry guys who are just, like you said, Sliabh Miller guys, the main board directors. So we've got the CFO, we've got the legal counsel,
Dominic and John, isn't it?
That's right, Dom DeLorenzo, John Davidson, really wise, calm heads. Nothing phases them. I think the first few conversations we had, I did have to stop them talking about trying to do things in billions and get them down to millions. But they very quickly kind of got the pace that we needed to operate at, the kind of challenge that was needed, the support that was needed. And James Keith, who's been a friend now for a number of years. James has got a career in construction, but specifically in fundraising for new companies. And James committed to essentially to try and help me and Moira raise the money, but remain in control of the business. And so it's really been designed that way. We've got this mix, as I say, of drinks industry guys, local businessmen who've done really well and then want to give back and want to see something develop in the area. And so that's been really supportive. And then sort of friends and family. But you can only fish in that pond for so much. And we kind of got to the point where we felt like we either needed to go to institutional funds to go and get some. And we have got Asahi invested in us a few years ago. So Asahi have put in some money with us. And they're fantastic partners, to be honest. They've been absolutely superb. But the sort of last point of the retail for us, or the sort of next phase of kind of democratizing the ownership and trying to give people a chance to come in on a level of sort of 80 quid was by going to Crowdcube. And because it's not a vehicle that's really sort of used in Ireland very often, so you had to go to the UK to do it. We have a branch office in the UK, which meant we have EIS in the UK and we have EIIS on our shares here in Ireland. So we were compatible with both to make them sort of tax efficient. And then we went, you have the big decision about how do you go to Crowdcube and can you crowdfund in COVID? People are sitting at home, people have been made redundant, they've been furloughed. And if it doesn't go well, it's a very, very public fail. So there were a lot of kind of conversations around that, but essentially it feels like we've, particularly for Moira and James and myself, it feels like almost every conversation we've had with anybody has been almost an investor conversation. So you're almost in a dragon's den for the whole of the last 5 years. Then Crowdcube went live, and we just found our voice. I think we couldn't hide behind the parapet anymore. You had to stand up and say, this is what we're about. And the sort of community aspect of the story, I think, resonated. And
well, it was an optimistic story and a positive story at a time, I guess, that was needed, and it's resonated with people.
Yeah, and I mean, it was ultimately I think it was the third biggest raise in the UK and in food and drink, and the fifth biggest in Europe. And it was humbling to see it kind of work the way it did. Kind of addictive as well. But we've made some crazy decisions, Sergio. We committed to make sure that we responded to everybody who put a question in within 4 hours, day or night. And we managed to hold to that, and we also said we're going to be completely transparent. So you ask a difficult question, you'll get the open answer, warts and all, and I think that also stood us in good stead.
Yeah, I mean, it was a risk, a big risk, but I think it's a risk that's paid off not only in terms of the finance raised, but it was a great marketing vehicle as well. The fact that it did succeed.
Yeah, and it also got picked up. I think, as you say, it was a good news story, and so it got picked up by Sky News, and it got picked up by a few people like that, and so we got some exposure we probably wouldn't have got otherwise. And now you can see it. A year, less than a year later, it's kind of up, and you can really, it gives people every reason to believe in the next step and what we're going to do next and how we take the business forward from here.
Yeah, one of the more, if I don't mind, one of the more interesting cask programs, in the sense that one, it's sensibly priced, but I think you're the only one, if not one of very few, that are competent enough to offer a buyback scheme as well.
Yeah, well, I think cask schemes, they've got a bad rap, I think, of late, because there are some charlatans out there. But for us, it's always been, this is about a club. You're owning a piece of history, and you're joining us on the journey, and we will celebrate you. So around the base of the stills, around the spirit still is the names of all the investors are being carved into wooden blocks around there, and then around the intermediate still is all the cask owners, and then around the crowdfunding, it's some of the Crowdfunding guys are going around there. So we kind of want to recognize people that have done it, but also the casks for us are, you're part of the story. We called it Shanachie because you don't. I don't think you buy a barrel because you want 350 bottles of whiskey. I think you want to tell a story of it. So you are a Shanachie, and for us that was the piece. Be with us. It's part of our Biggie Lynn program, which is Be With Us, and it's about being part of the story and helping, and knowing that you're helping to contribute to the development of this business in Donegal for the long term. And so the questions that we kind of put to ourselves was, right, well, what do you need to know? So in the same spirit as the Crowdcube, we so it's completely transparent in the brochure. It tells you exactly what it costs, not just the cost of buying a cask for 6,000 euros, but actually the bottling cost, the VAT, the storage, everything is in there. So you can see, and it's all added up, so that you can see that I think it costs 42.31. If you get 350 bottles, it will cost you 42.31 a bottle. That's the absolute cost at the end of it. And we'll take, we'll happily bottle it for you and do all of that. But we also thought that actually, if we were to do, we're not selling it as an investment, but actually, if you are in the scheme and at 5 years you don't want the barrel, then first of all, you have to try and sell it. So we will help you try and sell it, because I'm convinced there'll be a waiting list of people wanting peated Irish whiskey. If you still can't, if you phone 3 of those guys and can't sell, then we will buy it back off you for a compound 3% a year. So it was more than you're getting in the banks. It's not a great deal, but it is more than you're getting in the banks at the moment. And hopefully that underwrites it for people and gives them confidence in what we're doing.
It's a confidence builder as well. But what I do like about it, and I'm not, I've said it out in public before, I'm not a massive fan of cask programs as an investment vehicle, or them being sold heavily as an investment vehicle is what I abhor, if I'm honest. But what I like about your scheme is it is very transparent, and I think the effect is visible directly. There was the crowdfunding, the distillery was built. You're getting the money into the cask, some other element is going to, and I have to applaud you on that. So in terms of
thank you.
cask programs, it
certainly. Shall I put you down for one then, Sergio?
Yeah, I'll take 2. What was it? 43.41 a barrel or a bottle? Was it?
A bottle, I'm afraid, mate. But
someday,
I think you're right. They shouldn't be sold as investment schemes. They are about being part of the club, knowing that you're contributing to the development of the business and keeping the jobs local and keeping the business local, and that's a good thing to be doing. And at the end of it, you will get 300 odd barrels of peated single malt, and I suppose, or peated pot still. And you only have to look at the wholesale prices of peated versus unpeated to know that it's valuable liquids.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about the different mash bills, the different recipes for the pot still that you're going to be doing? Are you going to be doing what's considered compliant or non-compliant, or are you just?
Well, I suppose this is where I'm probably on a bit of thin ice, being a member of the IWA, but we're non-compliant. So the single malt, although our test batches are all being made with Scottish malt because we couldn't get any Donegal malt. Our pot still is made with Donegal barley, and from February we'll be moving on to Donegal sourced for all of our grain, which will be fantastic. So it really underpins the story. So the single malt, peated single malt, more than 65 parts a million. Where we get to from 65 up is really about how we can work with the stills and work out how where the flavour comes to and where we want it to come to. Then the pot still recipe is a 50-30-20. So 50% malt, 30% barley, 20% oats.
Okay, so
and the malt and the oats are both peated. So in fact, the peated oats are coming from Irish craft malts. So
out in Kildare. Is it Kildare or Meath?
Meath.
Kildare. Yeah, we were down there. Well, so Paul, I think from Irish craft malts was with us. Is that going to be an issue?
I don't believe so. I mean, I think Finon said to me some time ago that that's pretty close to the original Powers mash bill.
In terms of, is it going to be an issue in terms of, a lot of people now are looking for peated to get into the peated. Maybe it's a one-off, maybe it's a small part of their overall business. For you, it's everything. Sourcing peated oats, peated malt, it's going to be a difficult thing. Do we have the capacity in Ireland to produce enough peated?
So no. So at the moment, we're talking to suppliers where the barley from Donegal will go over to Scotland to be malted over there, and we'll send our turf over with it, and then it will come back. Which I think, if I'm right, Waterford have also done actually. But it's important for me that we get the turf effect is one that's local to us, so it's sweeter, dry, all of that kind of good stuff. And so that's one aspect of it, but actually, in conversation with the sort of farmers of Donegal, there are more farmers switching from feed barley into distillers malt, and talking to Irish craft malts, they can't produce enough for us right now, but I think the ambition in the market certainly is that if there's sufficient demand and people like us commit to local sourcing, then people will invest in the capex required to build these things. So I'm passionately hoping that people will see the kind of not us as a kind of an outlier, but us as at the vanguard of kind of that Smokies generation, and that other guys will be coming in and doing it. And I think more along the West Coast will try and do it, and I think quite a few of the guys around Belfast are doing it. So the demand will be there. It's just you've got to get committed, and that we've got to show the commitment to those local maltsters that allow them to invest.
Yeah, I have a question in here from Jonathan, who is in Argentina. Good evening, Jonathan. So he's pushing Irish whiskey in Argentina. He's doing a great job. But will there be another round of crowdfunding?
Yeah, very likely. So, sorry, excuse me. The next round of funding will kick off next March. So our shareholder agreements are structured in a way that means all of our existing shareholders have preemption rights. So we will go to those first, but we will very likely go back to CrowdCube for probably a June round of crowdfunding. We've yet to design all of the details of it, but it's certainly, we need to fund the business going forward. There's plans for the visitor aspects of it. There's expansion plans for the gin. There's support for Silky. There's a lot of big ideas and big plans to go forward, and that's the funding will go towards that.
Yeah. You mentioned tourism there, or the visitor center, and I think you've made a very conscious and admirable decision not to do certain things that would traditionally be, associated with a visitor center. Do you want to
Yes.
expand on that with us, please?
Yeah. I'm actually I think Jonathan actually may have been one of our crowdfunders, actually.
Okay.
So,
Maybe he'll let us know, Jonathan. Are you a secret funder? Secret billionaire?
So we'll find out in a minute, I'm sure. But sorry, the question was around the visit aspects. Yeah, so I suppose our kind of very clear idea, and has been all the way through, is that hospitality is something you need to be very good at, first of all. And, we're very fortunate that the distillery will have a footbridge leading from the town into the distillery over the river, which would be beautiful. And we're in a town that has a multitude of kind of good hospitality offerings. So we will not be offering, as part of the distillery, a kind of cafe, restaurant, or anything like that. So there will be our visitor experiences. Come and see the distillery, and learn about why we're here, what we do, how we do it, and varying levels of tour depending on how much detail you want to go into. You do the whiskey distillery first, you will then go into the gin distillery and do the gin story as well, and then into the tasting bar where you can get to taste all the products. But apart from a coffee for a driver, I don't think there will be anything else in the way of hospitality, because I think when you're in part of the town, it's about not competing with that town for that tourist dollar. It's about completing the town's offer to that tourist. So if we can keep people for an hour, then there's Eddie Doherty or Triona Design and their weaving businesses will keep them for another hour. And well, that's the morning or the afternoon gone, and so now you need coffee, or you need dinner or lunch, or you need a bed, or so. We don't see our role as being one of kind of trying to offer a destination. You come to us and then you drive on to somewhere else. It's drive into the village, park in the village, come and spend some time with us, but then go and spend some time with the weavers, the craft guys, the restaurateurs, the bakers. We've got so many things that you can do in the area. If we can extend the amount of time people spend in the area, then they'll spend more time. They'll discover more things, and they'll fall in love with the place and come back.
Yeah, I mean, that's still a fairly new and rare form of tourism that's been done in terms of business center. I have to say, it makes complete sense when you think about it, that it's replenishing the area.
I think, I think it's kind of logical from me anyway, because I don't think Moira will tell you she's like 90% introverted, so she is the shyest person you'll ever want to meet. So the idea of her being showcasing stuff would horrify her. And from my perspective, I know from working in bars and restaurants, it's just you've got to be cut for it, and we're not. So let's not try and be cut for it. Let's do what we want to do, which we're good at, and hopefully that'll be making great peated whiskies and and savory gins. And I know Moira's got a couple of new variants that she's developing at the moment for Andulaman. and then we're part of that community rather than competing with the community, and we don't want to do that. So I think it's a logical place for a lot of people.
How have you been received then in general, or by the community there? Must have been tough in the beginning, huh?
I think it's I think at first there's a certain level of skepticism that is it really happening? Will it really happen? Do they have enough money? And there's always a couple of naysayers that get in the way and who have more airtime than you do. But we kind of just said, let's just keep our heads down. Let's just keep driving forward. We lost the site. The guys in Ardara, when we found the second site through our architects, that since that point, the community there, I think it's a town that has hospitality and festivals at its heart. So they see the value of it very clearly. And we've probably done some things better than we did last time. So we shared the plans of the distillery with the immediate neighbors before we shared them with anybody else. And then we had a big public open evening where anyone could ask any question they wanted. And that meant that when the planning permission went in, the application went in, there was zero objections. So we've got no objections at all, which it must be unheard of. So I think we've had nothing but good feeling come towards us since we've really started building, and I think people see the opportunity. I think what they're now seeing is, as you said, the distillery is big enough, and it kind of gives you a sense of scale of the ambition and the potential, and I think that is kind of turning a few heads, and people kind of, I think, even more engaged with it, which I think is a really good thing. And I
mean, the Wild Atlantic Way gets an awful lot of traffic, if you like, but I mean, this is going to be a definite stop on that now, and surely for Ardara, it's going to be a great. The whole area is going to be a great facility.
I think it's specifically, yes, because there's the distilleries in Ardara, but if you look at a tourist moving around the Sliabh Liag Peninsula, basically if you're from Donegal town to Glenties and you draw a line there, the whole of the peninsula is where people spend their time, and it's incumbent on all of us not to sort of get too sucked into kind of parish politics and this one, I don't want them to get ahead because that means we're not getting ahead. I think it's how do we fill 2 days rather than a day for a tourist in the area, and how do we give them different things that they can do indoors, outdoors, historical, current, whatever. But we need to think about that our area and championing the kind of history and the culture in a way that is engaging and that people can dip in and out of, but they can dip in and out of it in different places. So I don't see the kind of parish boundaries that lots of people see, and I suppose that's because we've kind of come home as opposed to being born into it.
Yeah. Obviously, here's John Burke. Good evening, John. Nice to hear from you. And he's just reiterating the sentiments about keeping the businesses local active as well and being part of a community. I think that's what really resonates with people, and perhaps being, smaller size business maybe makes it a little bit easier to do that rather than, being a big corporate that comes into doing it. But
I think that's true, definitely. But I would say as well, I kind of sometimes wonder that if I was, you're not young Doherty coming back with big ideas, but I don't know, like say a German who had the same kind of ambition and the money. I think sometimes being from here but not from here kind of thing gets in the way sometimes.
Yeah, no, I can get that. It reminds you a little bit of the field, I suppose.
Well, I'm not going near waterfalls, so
you're not gonna... Well, look, in terms of jobs, obviously you are creating jobs, and I think I saw something were quoted that up to 40 jobs direct. Is that direct? Correct?
That's right. So that the 40 jobs is the kind of for the business in the round. We have I think we have 12 or 13 people employed at the moment in Carrick in the bottling lines where we have the gin distillery in Carrick. So we have a team down there that looks after sort of distilling, bottling, and logistics, dispatch, and sort of the brand teams as well, sort of based there. So, and you can see then that we're recruiting right now for two distillers to run
one distiller.
Well, no, we've got a head distiller, and he wants 2 distillers, 1 for each shift. And
I thought we had a discussion before this, James. That my name was against one of them.
Oh, right. Sorry, I did slip of the tongue, mate. Sorry, but there's jobs going, right now, and
what a great opportunity for somebody to come in. What kind of level of experience are you looking for them to have?
Well, I think that we're looking for shift guys that can run a shift, so they will have kind of dealt with it, and will be qualified distillers in terms of they've spent time in distilling and know what they've know what they're about, because the distillery is almost entirely manual. So yes, it's got a turnkey from the sides and there's a lot of kind of electronic stuff in there, but actually it's pretty heavily manually based because we wanted to create employment. So that's the route we've gone, and so that's the kind of start point of it. And then we probably need some good pairs of hands that can kind of keep stuff working, knock the head off a barrel, and a whole load of those kind of ancillary skills just around the distillery itself. Plus, next summer we'll open it to the public. I think next summer. I think we'll spend the winter perfecting recipes, learning about what's going on, how the bits of kit like to work, what would they don't like, how the cooker works, particularly with the pot still, and we'll do all of that, not quite behind closed doors. I mean, Laurie from Whiskey Chats, he was up, and guys are messaging me routinely. If they're in the area, we'll certainly meet up and have a look at the place.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's where the real effect will be felt, I suppose, on the knock-on effect of the economy of the local area, in terms of, people that come and visit you will need a place to eat, need a place to sleep. It's all.
And we've taken it to sort of a stage further. We've got so we had a tweed. My uncle used to was one of the designers at Avoca. So
Right.
he's retired now, but he designed us a family tweed, if you like. But the tweed is made up of the colors of the brands and the way we've kind of approached the business. And he designed it, Eddie Doherty. So we use local wools from Kilcar, and then Eddie Doherty is a hand weaver in Ardara whose workshop actually overlooks the field where the distillery is. He then hand wove it so that we can make jackets and waistcoats and caps and whatever we want out of it. So it's kind of funny how that kind of circular economy starts to fill out.
It's funny how things have fallen. If you look at the whole story, and I know there were difficult times in the beginning and there were challenges, but everything seems to have slotted in nicely. And the backdrop of the story, it doesn't seem to have been manufactured. Like it just gels. It's there. It's a question of calling for it, and you found it, and you're resonating it with the right voice. And I think that's why, there's this kind of fanboy element now, I think, towards the Silky brand.
It's my good looks.
That's probably what it was. That would explain my success of my show as well. But yes, we certainly got a lot of inquiries about the show. A couple of other questions then. Other than that, in terms of sustainability, and I think that was one question raised by Dennis again. Obviously, that's you're in a very rural setting. You don't want to be bringing heavy machinery and using up heavy resources. How important is that?
So we've done as much as we can afford to do at the moment, but we have future-proofed the distillery in terms of additional kind of heat recovery and what have you. So we kind of capture the waste heat at the moment for heating the visitor aspects. So they're not heated from. So there's no secondary heat source for that. But the main distillery, so we use, there is a steam boiler that's kind of firing up the cooker. But after the cook, we actually we have to cool it before it goes into the fermenters. And that cooling process heats the water for the next cook. So so we've got passive heat recovery on all of the processed waters. And the same is true. So when you get to the wash still, so the pot ale from the previous day is used to preheat the charge for the next day. The spent lees from the intermediate still is used to preheat the charge of the intermediate, and the spirit stills for the next day. And we have, instead of straight condensers, we have heat recovery and a sub cooler on it. So the wash still is the condenser is actually heating the processed water tank outside, so keeping it up at 80 degrees. So I think we've got a hell of a lot of heat recovery, heat exchangers, and probably some of the headaches we've got at the moment are making sure that they're all capable of dealing with the grains in process. But the guys at Forsyths have really manfully kind of solved all of the headaches that have come so far. And we'll do more, as we can afford to. So I think we'll, there's the roof space is huge, so we can put a massive amount of photovoltaics up there. We've got boreholes sunk, so we can use heat recovery from there if we want to. I think you can't really come into these things today without an eye on sustainability, because it's almost transparency is a big part of your agenda, about what you stand for, and sustainability is another. And we're not for the new site, but for the old, the Carrick site where the gin distillery is and the bottling line, that's we're Board Beer Gold members this year, so we've reached that gold standard in their sustainability drive. anyone who's buying from us will know that anything that comes out of the shop, there's no plastic in any of our packaging. So we'll continue to drive that because we want to drive it rather than we're specifically telling a story about it.
Yeah. There was another point that I wanted to make, and that was, as if you're not busy enough, you also have the position of vice chairman of the Irish Whiskey Association. And obviously, you get a chance to obviously influence the decisions there that are made. How important are the new regulations that have been proposed in terms of, pot still, in terms of what peated whiskey is? How do you welcome those, or what's your view on them? And how does being a member and being vice chair affect what you do?
Well, I suppose vice chair, I have to thank John Quinn for that, and to be honest, he has the brief kind of well and truly wrapped. So the demands on my time are nowhere near what they are on his. So I think in that sense, it's probably not that burdensome. I kind of, to your point right at the beginning, I come from a corporate background, and so I have a kind of view. I have a view on how I think the industry should develop. I've got some questions around how does regionality become a thing? Does it become a thing based on the way Fulcher Island have broken Ireland up into the ancient East and the Wild Atlantic Way and all of this kind of stuff? I don't know, but I kind of wonder that there isn't a big brand out there. There isn't a big company that owns enough distilleries to impose a kind of regionality. So what does that look like if you don't have an imposition of it? So we don't have a Diageo. So I think those kind of things are kind of interesting for me, and I want to have a seat at the table of the body that I think is going to have the most influence, and so that's why we're members of the IWA. And I think I suppose my voice in terms of the smaller guys' voice within the IWA, I think is changing, is bringing weight to the IWA in a good way. I think we're bringing challenge around, the technical file for one, but also the tone of voice that the IWA uses and why we talk about things the way we do. And, do we think about stuff, and are we seen as too corporate, and actually are we seen to represent the smaller guys? And the small business firm, small business committee within the IWA is much more active now than it was maybe a few years ago.
That's very transparent, I think.
And it's also a lot of us kind of driving, happily sharing the kind of our experience of Crowdcube, or Elliot came on and shared his experience of the cask schemes, and so it's always been a collegiate industry, really, and it's become much more, I'm hoping that we can make that small business part of it even more kind of collegiate, more supportive, and more practical, because that's where the hard yards are. And if I've got scars from stuff that I've learned, then we should help people not have to wear those scars. So I think that bit of the IWA has been really good. And then when I just think about the technical file, there's kind of modern tradition and there's historic tradition, and I think we need to make sure that the some of the richest of innovation is going to come from looking into history in the way that Finon has, and kind of brought up some of the stuff that they're doing at Boan, for example, in terms of those mixed mash bills and stuff. That's such a rich place, and we have to be extraordinarily. I think we should be really grateful that we have an Irish whiskey industry at all, and that's down to Bushmills and IDL and latterly Cooley, and that's enabled us now to stand and do what we want to do. That the technical file was written before anyone could have really conceived of how all of us were going to turn up and try and change, go back to history. Instead of just building from, say, 1950 onwards, we're all looking to other places for inspiration and for ideas. And the reality, I think, is as well that the big guys will know that part of their challenge is being thought leaders as well. So if you think about who are the thought leaders in the industry, you probably say it's all the smaller guys. And the reality is that IDL and probably Bushmills to some extent have been trying things, experimenting. Some of the stuff we do is just too small to be interesting for them, but they've probably tried it. And they've now got, they're now as restrained as we are by the technical file. So it's absolutely in everybody's interest to see it change. Because then
in terms of being a member yourself, what were the benefits for you as a small business, other than being able to obviously voice your opinion on the technical side of it? But I presume you took advantage of the education schemes, the knowledge transfer, the opening of markets. Were they vital for you, or just made easier?
Some of it was vital and some of it was made easier. So I think, my background is distribution and brands, and I have a limited technical experience. So the market stuff is probably less important to me than the technical pieces, and being able to touch on, to tap into the technical support that's there. So from a labeling perspective, from a can I say this, can I go at these things like this, but also being able to just pick up the phone because you've sat with Jack or Stephen Teeling at a meeting, or you can talk to people who have already come across the problems you've come across. And actually the one person who right at the beginning and continues to be a great help to me is someone like Peter Mulryan, who carefully cultivates his kind of angry man voice, but actually, we went and saw Peter when he did his first, So You Want to Make Gin course way back in 2016, I think it was. And he shared everything so openly with us. And, not just me, I think it was about 15 of us on the course. And we, subsequently, whenever I phoned him up and said, Peter, what I'm thinking about this. And he's like, geez, don't do anything till you've spoken to your revenue officer. Don't do this until you've done that. And, David Armstrong up at Radamon, Jarlath, all of the guys. I think it's the fact that you can then talk to these guys and say, I'm coming up against this, what do I do? I think that stuff is invaluable. But I find that there's, having an agenda. I do have an agenda. I would like to see Irish Whiskey challenge, Scotch, and I'd like to see us being the sort of the go-to category that people kind of go, this is the brand, these are the categories that are really on fire, these are the guys that are really relevant, these are the guys that are changing the way people should be doing things, and coming to us instead of people kind of looking at the SWA and going, oh, well, the SWA is the gold standard. Well, I wouldn't have a voice in the SWA, so I'm way too small, so I don't think it is. They don't have one member, one vote, so I don't like that either. There are guys that will say, well, to be a member of the IWA, you have to join IBEC, and that's more expensive. And I get that. For me, that's a cost worth paying, because I get access to the Small Firms Association, their legal people, their HR people, and I get guidance there. So in the round, I think it's a place that works for me, and I think it's what's important is that we all have the best interests of the category at heart. And kind of put that through and challenge, and where we have differences, kind of openly share them, and kind of we can agree to differ. There's stuff on the technical file that's been submitted, and I don't want to go into it now, but I don't agree with some of it. But it's kind of, that's the view that's going in. When it goes out to public consultation, if I disagree, I can put a view in.
I wanted to touch on one person who obviously had a significant role in Sliabh Liag and the founding of it, and that's the late Oliver Hughes.
Yes.
And I saw on your website you do pay a nice tribute to him, of course, and he was definitely a charismatic renegade, that's for sure. And I think my first meeting with it was actually up in Sliabh Liag, or driving him home from Sliabh Liag back to Dublin, which I don't think he appreciated too much. But how big an influence was Oliver, what you're doing, and overall?
Do he was one of these guys that you when you met him, you knew immediately that you were going to work with him. Just you knew, and he did have. I think he was visionary. I think he was very, very good at surrounding himself with people who could help him deliver that. I think he recognized that, and he put challenge on us that helped us shape a better business, for sure. So we're in a better place. And some of the early hurdles we kind of went through, he facilitated conversations for us that we wouldn't have got a voice at the table without him. So he's always, I'll always be grateful for that. I was very fortunate that because I came out of a sort of corporate background, that he and Liam Lahart were at the same time were looking at how they structured the porterhouse and how they looked at Dingle and what all of these businesses meant. And I have a sort of more strategic, more corporate sort of structure in my head. And so they asked me if I'd sort of help kind of informally chair the business for them. So, we had a lot of time together. We had a lot of curries in, at Shiva's place. What is it called now? Just down the road from Porterhouse Central. But, we used to sit there and put the world to rights over red wine and a curry. And I've been, I think his loss is, it was significant at the time for us. I think we've kind of weathered it well. I think it was massive for Porterhouse and Dingle. Monty's, absolutely. Thank you, Dave. But one of the things that he would be, I think, incredibly proud of, but I'm incredibly proud of, is the way that Elliot stepped into a biz dev role and kind of really has stepped into the sort of leading elements of the business, the way Liam Lahart, who would not have been wanting that kind of top job and to have to sort of pick up the reins and run the whole thing, the way they picked that business up and approached the banks, the shareholders, everything else, and held it together. That board of directors and Elliot and Liam specifically were incredible at that time, absolutely incredible. And the business probably innovation-wise slowed down a little bit, but probably discipline and structure and kind of it actually is. I think it's a stronger business now than it was then, and that's not because Oliver died, but because I think that his sad death left us with a need to solve these things. And so remarkable family, remarkable people, and Helen actually is still a shareholder in Sliabh Liag now. So
that's great. Look, I've kept you a long time, and time has just flown. But just quickly, and so see if we can do it quickly. But where do you see the future for Irish whiskey, and where do you see it for Sliabh Liag and Ardara?
So I think the industry is very, very well placed. I think the category is strong. I think John Quinn said, a rising tide lifts all ships. I'd say a rising tide lifts all seaworthy ships. So I think we need to make sure that the businesses are well funded. I think there's a much better approach to kind of labeling and stuff like that. And there's more. I'm sure there's more that will come on that. I think there's a much greater diversity of liquid available to now. There's the whiskies that are coming out is very good. I would have a watch out about the kind of uber premiumization of some of the industry. That would worry me, that it becomes a little bit gauche and a little bit that could work against us in the long run. But I think as long as we get more sort of depth and diversity and kind of richness to the category, I think the business is going to, the category will go from strength to strength. And I love the fact that it's no longer just about distilleries, it's about people doing different things. So whether you're a bonder, an independent bottler, or a distiller, there's sort of the roles are kind of almost all being much more easily accepted. And I think the industry is kind of growing up into that. And I think it's a really good thing. Well,
everybody will need everybody at some stage.
I think that's right, and then for us, the Sliabh Liag piece within it, I think it's ultimately that we're taking a distinctive position within it. So we're not going to try and please everybody. We are going to try and please, we are going to create the Isla of Ireland in Donegal, and search for peated perfection, I guess, and hopefully our brand of savory gin and smoky Irish whiskies will be seen as distinctive and different and relevant, and kind of grow to a point that we can maybe do more things. Who knows?
Yeah. But I have to say, I'm a huge admiration of what you've done, and in all the difficulties that you've gone through, the challenges to taking the vision, going from Hong Kong to Donegal is certainly a change of pace. But
well, I think Moira,
I
have to say, Moira is really, she's the rock in our relationship, and she's a far better gin distiller than I ever was.
It's always the quiet ones.
Yeah, well, it's a quiet one and a nurse as well. So I think none of this happens without the kind of strength that she gives me. So,
well, I have to say, what it does strike me, and I'm sitting now and I'm thinking, and I remember, was it your grandmother that was in Sliabh Liag when you launched the Silky, or was it your mother?
No, my great auntie. No, my auntie. Sorry, my auntie. But sadly she died last year.
Yeah.
Auntie Mary.
But I remember having a chat with you up there, and your concept hasn't changed. Your concept of the, bringing to the locality the jobs, bringing to the locality the kind of tourism you're talking about, and then being true to yourself in terms of the type and style of whiskey, that has not changed. And it hits me now, like, quite.
It's funny when you think back to that.
Yeah.
And I think Petered wasn't a journey in 2016. People weren't ready for it.
No,
I don't think. But
it was a great. It's been a great night and a great ride, and a few bumps along the way, but I'm sure. But like I said,
still standing.
Yes, and standing stronger, I think. So look, I wish you and the team and all those in Ardara the very best of luck, great success. Looking forward to your presidency when it comes about, and we'll be up to visit as soon as
Please
we can.
do. Please come and see us, and we can show you around. And thank you so much for the time tonight, sir. Just really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate it. The time has really flown by, so I apologize for keeping you late.
Not at all, mate.
I apologize to Moira. I'm not apologizing to you.
If she sneaks in over my shoulder, you'll know you're in trouble. So
yes, yeah. Look, Slona and Ihua.
Ihua.
Take care. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us on that. Another conversation that I really enjoyed. And if you have enjoyed it, please do give it a like, follow and bear in mind that this is made possible by Irish Whiskey Magazine as well. And what we're trying to do is bring authentic stories. And I think James really epitomizes that brilliantly. So thank you for joining us, and we'll speak to you soon. Good evening. Sláinte.